Isn't that an oxymoron? And the reality is that what I'm going to share with you today, I think, is going to change your entire paradigm about networking, what it is, how it works, and how to utilize it more effectively. Let me just take a quick minute and expand a little on what Norval talked about here. First of all, my background, I spent 23 years in the corporate world in sales and management with two of the largest retail companies here in Canada. And I tell people at the peak of my corporate career, I was literally and figuratively fired into success. And I always like to let that hang there for a little bit and tell people that, you know, when that happened, being equal measure French, Canadian, and Irish heritage, I did one of those, I'm mad as heck. I'm never taking this anymore. I'm never putting my future in someone else's hands. So I decided to start my own company, a training company. And I got to tell you, I bounced around for a few years, doing anything for anybody. And I was really starving to death. And I remember sitting with one of my mentors and chatting with him about my situation and the lack of success. And he told me, he said, Michael, you're a one-person company. You got to network more. You got to get out there and work your network. Well, like many of you, I'd heard the word before. And I, you know, I thought I knew. I was in my mid-40s at that time. And, you know, I said to myself, I know what I'm doing, but I respected this person. So I decided to take his message seriously. So I started to research networking. I started to read everything I could get my hands on about it. I started to watch the successful people I knew, and I started to look at what they were doing, how they did it. And over a period of time, I started to achieve more success as I started to implement some of those concepts I saw that people I respected put into practice and apply some of those principles that I read about in the books that I read. And I've got to tell you that for the last 20 plus years, I've been singularly, some would say obsessively focused on networking as both a business strategy and as a professional competency. So the information I'm going to share with you today is really appropriate for you, whether you're an independent entrepreneur or contractor, whether you're a corporate leader or manager, or whether you're just looking at changing careers. What we're going to talk about is really something that is, I believe, more important, more valuable, and more effective today than it ever has been. So a little bit about today's event. We've got about 45 minutes together, and I'm going to share with you everything I've got. I mean, I have not come here to sell. I've not come here to preach. I've come here to share. And I want to do three things today. I want to increase your awareness of what networking really is, how it works, and how you can utilize it more effectively. The second thing I want to do, I want to share with you a methodology and some strategies that I put into practice that work for me and actually work for the people that I coach and train around this whole program, because I've got a philosophy and a methodology that I've developed that really has been validated over the number of years with both myself and a number of the folks I've been involved with. And the final thing I want to do today, I want to motivate you today to do some things differently than you did yesterday so that you can get better results from the networking you do. So as a starting point, let me just talk a little bit about what I call ASQ and then the network effect. Because the common denominator here, the context we have, is ASQ as a network. And essentially, where we're going to come from, the fundamental premise we're going to talk about today is how networks work. And I've studied networks as well as I have studied networking, and I want to start off with this particular piece as a foundation to where we're going to go. One of the things I wasn't aware of that it's important for me to share with you, because everything we're going to do today is going to fundamentally work out of this, is that there are basic fundamental network principles, what I call network laws. Networks are all around us. I mean, everything you do functions around networks. Let's face it. If you want to travel somewhere, you go there through a network of airports and aircraft, right? And I mean, so you get to everywhere you want to go. I mean, if you buy a cottage property 50 miles outside of town and you decide you want to build a home there and there's no electricity, how do you get the electricity there? You tap into the electrical network. So networks are all around us and are governed by fundamental principles. Every network, including social networks. Now, when I say social networks, most people think of the online networks that we talk about, but I'm really talking about your network, your personal network of people you know. And there are specific laws. There are 7 laws. Let me give you 3 quickly that I believe have an impact on you in your involvement with ASQ or the networks that you're involved in. The first law, the fundamental law, the primary law, I call the law of accessibility. And it says you have access to everything you want and need through the networks you have or have access to. You have access to everything you want and need through the networks you currently have or the ones that you have access to. Now, isn't it true the more people you know, the more information you can have, the more connections you have, the more opportunity you have. And that's why networks like ASQ are so important and valuable, because what they allow you to do is connect with more people. The next law I want to share with you that is applicable for us in today's session is what I call the law of random growth. Networks are in a continuous state of random growth. In fact, networks must grow or die. I mean, would it be fair to say that you know more people today than you did 6 months ago? Well, of course it is. We're all meeting more people as a byproduct of everything that we do. So networks, by their fundamental premise, actually assist and facilitate in expanding your network. The third law I want to share with you today is called the law of preferred attachment. It says in any network, whether it's your own or any formal network like ASQ, some connections, because of their position, because of their maturity, because of their potential, hold more power for you. Isn't it true that even within your personal network, not all relationships are created equal? Some people have more importance or power. So if you can connect with those people more quickly, if you can build relationships with them, you'll have more success faster. So fundamentally, networking occurs within a network and is really driven by the principles that I just talked about. And so the second piece is when you think of networking within a network like ASQ, it's important thinking in terms of having a plan. You know, all the major corporations now, the global corporations, are having their executives, as well as preparing a career plan, having them prepare a network plan. In other words, decide where you want to go, but then tie in the folks that you need to connect with and build relationships with so that you can get there faster. And the reason why, though, that's so important is because there's an actual process there that we're all involved in when it comes to networking and building relationships. Now, most of us don't think of that as a process. When it happens naturally, organically, we just take it for granted. But there's an actual process there that I've identified. I can't say I've discovered it, but I've identified that impacts every connection you make and actually facilitates the process of growing the relationship. Now, just let me remind you that if there is a process there, and we are competent, caring, and qualified professionals, then we have an obligation to be better prepared. See, one of the biggest issues for me when I first got involved in networking was that I thought it was about telling and selling. I thought my job when I walked into a room was to tell everybody about what I had and what I needed and get them to hire me. And maybe you feel that the biggest benefit ASQ can give you is that you can walk into a room and tell everybody what you need from a career standpoint, from a job standpoint, from a promotion standpoint, and it'll happen. But let me ask you a question. When's the last time you bought anything of any significant value from someone after a 30-second to 3-minute conversation? It just doesn't happen. So it's important to recognize networking's fundamental purpose. And I got this wrong for the longest time. See, to me, networking is not about telling and selling. It's not about having a conversation with someone and trying to qualify and close them on referring you or promoting you or helping you. Networking's true purpose is to bring two individuals together and act as the catalyst for the powerful relationships that are the basis for success in business and in life. Let me repeat that. Networking's true purpose, its fundamental premise, is to bring two individuals together and act as the catalyst for the powerful, productive, and profitable relationships that are the basis for success in business and in life. That's what it's designed to do. And you know, in my research around networking and my experience in dealing with this as a process and as a resource that we all have access to, I've come to terms with the fact that this is a skill. And there are 3 skill areas that I work on when I work with professionals like you. The first one is what I call networking as a business strategy, a business skill. And when I talk about business skill, I'm referring to seeing networking as a strategy. In other words, your strategic involvement with ASQ so that you can connect with the right individuals through the law of preferred attachment so that you can meet more people and you can exponentially drive the law of random growth and take full advantage of the accessibility that this gives you. So the first skill is seeing networking as a strategy, the business skill. Second skill is what I call the relationship skills. It's using the interactions you have with people, whether it's through your connection with them at ASQ, or whether it's in your business interactions, or really even in your general life, to move the relationships forward. And the third skill is interpersonal skills. It's the mechanics of networking. It's what you do, it's what you say, it's what you ask as you interact with others. And my experience has been that most of us get so stressed about the interpersonal skills, we don't get a chance to use those 3-minute conversations to advance the relationship process towards the results that we want and need. And today is about helping you better understand the process, manage it more effectively, not to manipulate people, not to take advantage of them, but to help the process happen easier, better, and faster. In fact, one of the biggest BFOs I got in my research around this, and you all know what a BFO is, right? A BFO is a blinding flash of the obvious. It's not what some of you thought it was, is it? And that's that really networking's true capacity is to help drive relationships. And the last 5 to 7 years, by the way, I've been more involved in researching networking as a relationship igniter and a relationship accelerator than anything else. Here's a powerful quote I read I want to share with you. Business is about results. Results arise from opportunities. Opportunity arises from relationships. You know, a guy told me a long time ago, said, Michael, you'll be successful in life as a result of the people you meet and the books you read. So it's all about building relationships. Now, every time I start going down this road, people kind of look at me funny and they say, you know, there's a disconnect here, Michael. I mean, you're talking about networking, these little conversations we have, and you're talking about relationships, the deep relationships we have. And I agree with you, but I don't see how the two fit together. And so let me just ask you a quick question. I want you to think about the 2 or 3 highest value relationships you have in your life right now. It could be someone that you've known for a long time. It could be someone you deeply respect. And as those names pop up or you see those faces in your mind, let me ask you, did those deep, meaningful relationships, did they happen overnight? Well, of course not. They took weeks and sometimes months to come to fruition. And so you see, if you and I could sit down and talk to those specific relationships and go back to the sequence of activities, this is true if we went back far enough, there was an ignition point. There was a connection point between you and that other person. And as you met him or her and you had that conversation, and as the two of you got to know one another better and built that relationship, there came that deep appreciation for who they are, what they mean to you, and how you can be more successful. See, one of my biggest messages to you today is that networking is relationships on steroids. That's what I call it, because of its capacity, not only to ignite a relationship, but to drive it forward if it's used effectively. In fact, let me share with you my definition of networking, and maybe a little bit different than when you walked in the room. And by the way, I just want to let you know, some of you may be writing notes on this, and you may be concerned about missing some of the stuff I have, because I've got a ton of information to share with you today. I do want you to record the important points you hear, but I don't want you to get stuck on trying to write everything down. At the end of the presentation, I'm going to offer you a resource that will encompass everything I'm going to talk about today. So relax. Focus on the information, write down what you feel is important, but understand yourself. First one is, here's my definition of networking. I call it a business success strategy. Network to me is the intentional process of creating and developing relationships from initial contact to ultimate outcome. The intentional process of creating and developing relationships that always start with an initial contact and move towards an ultimate outcome. Let me speak to this a little bit. I'm talking about a process that always has a beginning, and that could be, you know, the last time you met someone, the last ASQ event you were at, and that it's a process that always, it's about creating and developing relationships. So it's a process that's ongoing. Always starts with an initial contact and moves towards an ultimate outcome. Now, you realize it doesn't say job, it doesn't say promotion, it doesn't say contract, it doesn't say project, it doesn't say client, it doesn't say profit, it says outcome. Because relationships, by their very nature, are unique and individual and supply unique and individual outcomes. So my one message to you today is that when you think of networking and connecting with people, to not discourage yourself from looking at them as an opportunity, because that's what they are. Now, in this definition, if you've written that down, there's one thing I want you to write down. It's going to be the entire theme of the program today. And the one word in here I want you to underline is the word intentional. Because my mission today is to share a methodology with you to help you understand how it works, to embrace it, and then to manage it in an intentional process. Again, not to take advantage of people, not to manipulate them, but to help it happen easier, better, and faster. So let me move away from the theoretical part of my program here, and I want to move into the practical application of the information I'm talking about. Now, we're going to get into a bit of an interactive mode here, and I'm going to have you use the chat portion when we get into this next section. So what I want to talk to you about now is what I call managing the social process. And in order for you to be able to maximize this little adventure I'm going to take you on in the next few minutes, I'm going to ask you to go back to the last formal event that you attended. Now, it could be the last ASQ meeting you attended. It could be some kind of formal event you attended at your company. It could be a community event that you attended. I just want you to put yourself in that mindset. And then I'm going to ask you a question, and I want you to just give me a quick response in the chat portion if you feel so inclined. As you were at that event, and when you walked around the room, how long did it take you to make an initial judgment on someone when you first met them? Or they for you? How long does it take us when we meet someone to make an initial judgment on them? So take a couple of seconds and just enter it in the chat. Somebody's saying 3 seconds here. Anybody else? Just want to give you a little bit of time to think about it. Somebody says 10 minutes. A couple of seconds, somebody says. Reality, 30 seconds. Well, let me give you the real piece. Research has now confirmed that we make an initial judgment on someone within 0.07 seconds of meeting them. It's not right, it's not fair, but it's reality. And you know, I've proven this over and over again. When I do presentations for large groups, I was at a PMI event in Charlotte, North Carolina last week, and I you know, when I brought this up, I asked people, I said, here's what I want you to do. When I give you the word, I want you to turn and look at somebody else that you don't know, and I want you to just make eye contact and acknowledge them. And so they actually did. And you know what? That's the point where the relationship actually starts. It's that quickly. Now, we don't realize it. We don't realize its impact, but it's an actual fact. So if you remember now, you walking up to that person, they walk up to you, remember that instantaneous connection is the starting point of the relationship. And then, of course, as the two of you came together and the conversation started, isn't it true that there was a little bit of discomfort there? You weren't sure what to say. It's a little difficult. I call it like an engine starting going, I call that the next 25 seconds. Now, most people think of these two phases, I call them, as one event. I bring them out as two separate and distinct impact points that can, in fact, affect the relationship. And then again, if we go back to that conversation, the two of you came together. Remember, I used the analogy of the engine starting, and all of a sudden, the gears meshed. And you had that wonderful conversation with that person. I call it the next 2 minutes. That's probably what you remember of the event, of the interaction you had. And then isn't it true, if that conversation went on long enough, all of a sudden you realized that the other person was maybe looking over your shoulder, or there were gaps in the conversation. And you said to yourself, oh my God, it's over. That's the last 5 seconds. Now, when most people think of networking, they think of these 4 phases, I call them. And the left brain people that are watching this or participating in this, you're looking at this, you're saying, the average networking interaction is between 30 seconds and 3 minutes. And that's enough time to ignite and start a relationship, but it's not enough. If you think of networking as these 4 phases and you go around and you have conversation with folks and you come home and expect the phone to ring, it's not going to happen because it's not enough. It's about creating and developing relationships. There are 2 more phases required to move the relationship forward. The 5th phase, which is the next 24 hours to 7 days, which is an analogy for what needs to happen after. I'm not saying that if you meet somebody at a networking event, you have a nice conversation with them, if you get a hold of them the next day, they're going to hire you or refer you. What I'm saying is there's a requirement for additional contact and relationship building after the initial contact. And then, of course, the final phase is what I call the final outcome. And again, it doesn't say job, doesn't say project, doesn't say promotion, doesn't say referral, it says outcome. So you see, this is the process that you've been going through for your entire life. Every time you meet someone, this process is ignited. How far it goes, how well it goes, or whether it goes depends on how you manage the process. Now, the good news is you're in charge. The problem is up until now, you've never been conscious of the process and really seen what it is and how it works. You know, I've been sharing this graphic with professionals for 15 years. Every time I share it, I can watch the light bulbs going off. People said, I never realized there was a process there. This is amazing. Now, let me add to this a little bit, because I've done a tremendous amount of research around the process, how it works and how to maximize it. And let me remind you that this is a social process. It happens between human beings. And because it's human beings are involved, it's fraught with emotional roadblocks, psychological speed bumps, and issues that are around there. So let me ask you a couple of questions about this process now from a human dynamic standpoint. And again, I want to use the little chat option here if you feel so inclined. Let me ask you, of these 6 phases that are here, which of these phases from a human dynamic standpoint do you think causes us the most anxiety? Which one do you think as human beings we get more stressed about, the most stressed about? Lots of responses, lots of responses. The reality is, the phase that causes us the most anxiety is the initial contact. Over 90% of professionals are highly stressed when they first meet someone. And it doesn't matter whether you're 16 or 60, whether you're a man or a woman, whether you're a naturalized citizen or a landed immigrant. Every one of us feels stressed about this initial contact point. Most people don't realize it. There's a sense of dis-ease about it. And it's amazing. And you know what? I see it all the time. I do presentations on this. I stand at the front of the room. People walk into the room, and the first thing they do is look for someone they know. And if they don't see someone they know, they tend to go sit by themselves. It's a natural reticence we have based on the way our brain works. I'm going to talk a little bit more about this in a minute, but I want you to be aware of that. I want you to be aware of that for yourself, because you may not realize how you feel. But more importantly, I want you to realize that that's how others feel. Because if you can help them reduce their anxiety, make them feel more comfortable, even at that initial contact point, all of a sudden they'll feel more secure and at ease, which builds trust. Now that I've got you thinking about this, let me ask you again from an interpersonal standpoint, which of these phases do you think is the second highest stress point? From a human dynamic standpoint, which causes us the second highest amount of stress? Go ahead and type it into the chat section if you want to. Getting lots at 24 hours to 7 days. Next 2 minutes, phase 6 24/7, next 2 minutes. The reality is, for most people, the second highest stress point from an interpersonal perspective is the last 5 seconds. That last piece of the conversation where you're not sure what to do, what to say. And the reason for that is quite simple, is because most of us haven't thought about this as a process. It should have a beginning, kind of a peak, and then not an end, but a transition. And we haven't thought in terms of that. We get so wrapped up in the conversation that we forget that this should have a natural transition or endpoint, and we don't manage it effectively. We haven't planned for it, we haven't prepared for it, but we don't do it well. Now, I have somebody asking me, what do I say to close the discussion? I'm going to talk about that in just a few minutes, but I want to keep you focused on the process for now. Thinking about it. Now let me add one more little wrinkle in this, because I'm a business professional. I coach professionals on how to manage this process effectively. So let me ask you, from a career development standpoint or a business development standpoint, when you look at these phases, which do you think, as professionals, we don't do as well as we could or should? And if we did it better, we'd probably have an immediate impact on our results. I'm getting a lot of people giving me the same message, and it's a message I get with every one of these presentations when I do them. From a business standpoint, from a professional standpoint, the phase that we don't do as well as we could or should is the next 24 hours to 7 days. It's following up. In fact, fully 90% of professionals readily admit they don't follow up after a networking event. Well, if you're going to do the first 4 phases, you're not going to do the 5th, are you ever going to get to the final outcome? Well, of course not. So my message to you is to think in terms of the process, to recognize the impact it has from an emotional, from a psychological standpoint, and then understand how to manage it effectively. And truly, if you realize this next 24 hours to 7 days and its impact on your success, you should be doing everything within the first 4 phases to facilitate that next 24 hours to 7 days, to make that happen. See, my message to you is, when you look at this process, is if you could take the first 4 phases and make them more meaningful and more memorable so that that other person wanted to hear from you, wouldn't that make this phase 5, next 24 hours to 7 days, easier for you and for them? And wouldn't it facilitate the process going? That's what this is all about. So what I want to do now is I want to take each one of these phases and quickly drill down in each one to share with you some strategies that you can use that can be helpful to you, recognizing that you're already doing a lot of this well. See, no one achieves the level of success that you have in life without being fairly good at this. My job is to make you better so that you can do this easier, better, and faster. Now let's talk about this initial contact. Remember, this is the highest stress point for most people. And the kicker is most people don't understand why. So what can you do in order to make that happen? Well, let me just give you a little piece of information here. By taking responsibility for managing an initial contact and minimizing its anxiety, you're perceived as more personable and professional. So it's all about taking charge. So let me give you just a little bit of a recipe here, if you will. When it comes to the initial contact, I tell people this is a powerful point. Why? Because it, in many cases, can dictate how quickly the relationship can build and grow. What do I mean by test? Well, first thing is take charge of the conversation. How many of you have ever hosted a party? Well, just about all of you have, right? Well, when you're hosting a party and somebody walks in, what do? You introduce yourself, you make them feel comfortable. Hi, how are you? Thanks for coming. So whether or not this is your party, whether or not you're in a leadership capacity or ASQ or whatever event you're at, put on your host or hostess hat. Take charge of the conversation. It takes all the pressure off the other person. It helps them. The E stands for enthusiasm. It's about being positive. You know, one of the things that happens when we walk into an event is we end up taking all of the self-esteem issues, self-confidence issues we have with us, and we carry them with us. And here's my suggestion. If you were to presume that you were going to meet your biggest client at this event, if you were going to meet a contact who would give you the biggest promotion you had or give you that best job you ever had, would you think a little differently? So my suggestion to you is that networking success is as much about attitude as aptitude. And if you can help yourself get into a positive frame of mind, to tell yourself that you will meet some great people, you'll make some good friends, you'll get some good information, what will happen is you'll be more positive. The third one is to smile. And simplistic as it sounds, a smile is incredibly helpful. Now, your smile, of course, has to have a second S. Your smile needs to be sincere. Because if you remember, we can pick out a fake smile. We can tell when people are just going through the motions. So it's all about being in the moment. And then there's one last piece here. It's about putting the total focus on the other person. And you may say, well, just a minute, Michael, that's common sense. Well, unfortunately, common sense isn't common practice. And it takes maturity and discipline to give the other person the floor and allow him or her to talk first. But in doing that, what happens is you make them feel comfortable. They look at you differently and they say, you know what, I kind of like her. Now you see, that's when just when the two of you come together. This happens in the blink of an eye, in less than a second. And it's hard for people to really think in terms of doing that. So what I've done and what I suggest you might want to do is you might want to think in terms of creating what I call a personal introduction strategy. Think in terms of the 3 or 4 things that you can do every time you meet someone, because you're doing it over and over and over again, that would facilitate the process. In my case, I do eye contact, a genuine smile, I lean forward a little bit, I offer my hand and introduce myself. And you know what? By thinking in terms of that and getting better with that, increasing your competency, competence brings confidence. You'll be perceived as more personable and more professional. Now that's the initial contact. And then as we move along into the next 25, remember, people buy people first, ideas second, and things last in that order. It's all about the relationship, not business. In fact, my suggestion to you is to take your business agenda and put it in your back pocket in the early stages of a networking interaction. Counterintuitive as that sounds. See, the next 25 seconds, the more conscious part of coming together, when the conversation starts, is really a chance for you to build the relationship. See, the relationship is already there. Most people don't think in terms of that. In the next 25 seconds, listen, let me ask you a question. In any networking interaction, in a formal business environment, what's the question you get asked within 5 or 10 seconds? It's always, what do you do? That's the question people think they should ask. They're taught to ask, or they're told to ask. And really, if you remember the fact that we buy people first, ideas second, and things last in that order, it's really counterintuitive. My suggestion to you is that in this next 25 seconds, you realize the relationship is already there. Your job is to keep it safe. Now, what do I mean by safe? Use topics of conversation that are relationship enhancing, relationship building, that's focused on you and the other person. What do I mean by that? The situation that you're in. If you're at an ASQ event, and ask that person, is this your first event? Have you been to this hotel before? Do you know this speaker? So you can develop that together. Are you an ASQ member? It's about activities. The activities people are involved in. People give us cues. They give us clues by what they say, what they wear, sometimes even how they act. So it's about getting that together. About our family. What's more important to us than our family? I've got a 4-year-old granddaughter. I can talk to you for hours. And it's about current events. Staying away from religion, politics, and sex. Now, I see someone has asked a question here. How do you balance the conversation talking about you and talking about them, I'm presuming? Talking about me and talking about you. Well, and you know what? Too many people, when they think of networking, they think in terms of a conversation as an exchange of information, like a tennis match, right? They say something, you say something, they say something, you say something. Here's my recommendation. Stay away from doing that. Think in terms of making it about them. The more you make it about them, the more they'll give you all kinds of information, insights about what's important to them. They'll talk about their pain and their passion. And then at a certain point in time, what'll happen is they'll ask you to talk about yourself. See, that's how I do it. I let the other person talk and talk and talk, and then I have to say, geez, Mike, I've been talking for 15 minutes. Tell me about you. You see, this is what I call the peak of the networking interaction. It's when many professionals make the biggest mistake around networking and using it as a relationship driver. They don't realize that as you continue to dialogue with that person, in fact, getting him or her talk more, here's what's going on in their mind. When we feel comfortable and relaxed with a conversation partner, we want to know what value they represent, not what they do for a living. So you see, when they ask you, what do you do? That's the surface question. What they really want to know is what's your value. And your value resides in 3 pieces of information. I call this communicating effectively. The first piece of information is, what's your target market? Who do you want to connect with? Who are you there to meet? The second piece of information is, what is the number one benefit of the products or services that you provide to that target market? And the third one is, what is the result for those people who do business with you as they take advantage of that benefit in that target market? It's all about crafting a statement that communicates your value. Now, this isn't about an elevator pitch. I don't ascribe to that philosophy or mentality. It's about communicating effectively to that other person. Now, let me give you an example. When people ask me, they say, it's about planning, preparing, and practicing a 15-word positioning statement that communicates your professional value. Less is more. This needs to be strategic, specific, and succinct. Let me give you an example of mine. This is what I have in the back of my business card. People say, what do you do, Michael? I say, I'm known as North America's networking guru. I specialize in helping professionals increase results and profits by building better relationships. My target market is professionals. That's who I want to connect with. The result of working with me is increased results and profits. I help professionals create a plan and drive towards that. And the benefit of working with me is better, more impactful relationships. Now, if you think in terms of the process itself, what happens is you'll have that conversation that you and the other person will actually build a conversation until you get that value exchange. What do you do? And then you ask them, what do you do? And the conversation will either continue at that peak or will begin to decline. That's not bad. It's just the process and the way it works. So let me share with you now what I call the last 5 seconds. Remember, this is the second highest stress point for most professionals. Why? Because we get so attuned to the conversation, we don't realize where we are and we don't handle it well. So how can you maximize this particular piece? Well, it's the acronym I use is ACT. And first one is this, much like the first 5 seconds of the initial contact, is accept responsibility. When you realize there's no further value for you or the other person, your job, your responsibility is to wind the conversation down. And it could be through a summary statement you have, or to thank the other person, or make sure that you do that. And plus, this is the correct opportunity, if you haven't already, to create a follow-up opportunity. Hi, Norval. Really enjoyed chatting with you. Incredible to know some of the stuff you do. We didn't really get a chance. I know the meeting's going to start in a minute. I'd love to find out more about you, Norval. Could I get your card? Love to have a quick chat and find out more. And when Norval says, yes, he's giving me permission, he'll think of me more as a professional when I do call. See, you will reduce or eliminate any anxiety you feel about following up if you confirm a follow-up contact before parting company. It's the simplest, most effective thing you can do. People say, well, what about if they say no? Well, first of all, if you're unsure about whether or not they're going to say yes, don't ask. But if you work harder over these first 4 phases to create a meaningful and memorable experience for the other person, you'll know they want to meet with you again, and you won't hesitate to do that. And the third piece is thank the other person. Even if you choose not to ask for a follow-up opportunity, go forward. What you do is you eliminate anxiety and procrastination by confirming a follow-up contact before parting company. Now, I'm getting some questions here on the chat room about some additional information on that. In the resource I'm going to give you, it's going to have a lot of this information. So not that I don't want to answer, I want to respect your time, stay on track, and make sure you know that I'm acknowledging what it is you want to do. So let me give you a graphical representation of how you can actually wind down a conversation and help it happen. The first one is start with the end in mind. If you presume you will want to follow up with someone, from the moment you meet with them, you will listen more actively, you'll be more in the moment, and what will happen is you'll be more attuned to them and have an opportunity to be able to follow up with them. The second thing is confirm value. Everyone likes to know that they receive value. And that could be a statement like, I really enjoyed chatting with you, some incredible opportunities that you're aware of. Thanks for sharing that with me. The fourth one is define parameters. You know, when the kids were young, I didn't change diapers. I didn't like surprises. And most of us need to know what exactly it is. Norval, really enjoyed chatting with you. Yeah, there's some incredible information I think you have. I'd like to find out more. Would it be okay if I gave you a call? Maybe we could have a coffee or quick lunch. I just want to know more. And the fourth one is clarify the reason. If you just enjoyed the conversation, that's okay. If you think you can be helpful to them, if you think that person can act as a value area for you, let them know so there are no surprises. I'm getting a question here about cultures, and you're absolutely right that different cultures look at these interactive experiences from a different perspective. For the majority of us, and the majority of information I'm sharing, this is really the North American norm. But you have to be conscious of other people. For example, like Japanese people, don't do eye contact very, very, very well. It can be intimidating to them. So you want to be aware of the cultures that you're involved in. It can have to do with a handshake as well. My suggestion to you is think in terms of the North American norms, but where necessary, make sure that you become acclimatized with what the different cultures have. So here's the managing the social process I've just given you. You can see how the process works and evolves. And you can see now that we've talked about these first 4 phases, and now I want to talk about the next 24 hours to 7 days. And as you can see on the PowerPoint slide, there's an extension there between the last 5 seconds and the final outcome. And that's a representation that you need to work at relationships. Relationships take time, they need to be nurtured, and they require investment. Now, some people ask me all the time, they say, well, how long should this take for me, Michael? And my response is, I don't really know, I'm not you. But here's what I can tell you. Let me give you a frame of reference. My sales cycle is 6 months, from the time I meet someone till the time I get my first check or start to work. So I seek to build relationships from that norm. People have told me in career transition, you need to allow for a month for every $10,000 in salary you have. So you want to build relationships to the extent that it's necessary. And you see, I'm going to put some little arrows in here. People say, how long should this go, or what should I do? My experience has been, and the research that is out there says that on average, a prospect or a client will say no to you 4 times during the course of a sale. So it's important and necessary for you to think in terms of building a relationship over those 4 no's, or those 4 question marks, or those 4 periods of insecurity. Building trust, eliciting value, and determining the contribution that you can make. And that leads me to the second last little piece I want to share with you, which is what I call next 24 hours to 7 days. I mean, this is a huge issue for many, if not most, professionals. I have a whole program on this. I don't have the time to share with you, but let me give you the 3 key pieces I share with folks when it comes to following up after a networking interaction and using that more effectively. First of all, is to be completely proactive. Take full and complete responsibility for following up. And people say, well, how long should I wait? Here's my message. The longer you wait between the contact and the follow-up, the harder you have to work to renew the energy and enthusiasm of the connection. The sooner you follow up, the easier it is to have that person agree to return your call, respond to your message, or to meet with you again. I generally send out follow-up messages within 12 to 24 hours, sometimes even sooner. If it's an evening event, I'll send out a follow-up message first thing in the morning. If it's a morning event, I'll sometimes send a follow-up message by noon. And that's not just to say, hi, glad to meet you, here's a PDF about my services. It's about creating the next contact to move the relationship forward. The second one is to be persistent. And you know what? I don't know about you, but I deal with successful professionals on an ongoing basis. My experience has been they are quite busy. So when I send them an email or leave them a voicemail and they don't respond, I don't get upset. I send them another one. And people say, well, how long should I keep this up? What I suggest to people is think in terms of 3 communication follow-ups in 3 different mediums of communication. So if you sent them an email and they don't respond, try a voicemail. If they don't respond to that, look to meet them again at the next event. Because you see, this isn't a one-time event. It's a process. You want to keep it moving forward. And the single biggest piece is to be patient. Relationships have their own sequence, their own journey. Your job is to take responsibility for continually moving it forward. So what will happen if you embrace networking as a strategy, if you build your skills at it? Here are the 5 payoff areas I tend to get on an ongoing basis from the networking I do. I'm sure as I share these with you, what you'll see is these are happening to you as well. I want them to happen in more frequency, with more quality, more often. First of all, direct results. Listen, my message to you is there's no question in my mind, if you embrace a networking strategy with an organization like ASQ or some other network, and you consistently go to meetings and meet people and build relationships, you will find people who want the services that you have to offer, who will refer you to their friends. But to me, that's just a tip of the iceberg. Far more important is what I call the indirect results. Those are the results that will occur as others become more aware of the competence, integrity, and professionalism that you have. They will recommend you to their friends, to their families, to their contacts, and their clients. The third payoff area is opportunities. And you know, one of the incredible things about connecting with people is they see us in a completely different light than we do ourselves. You know, I think I always have certain value to offer to people, but it amazes me how when I talk to other people, they look at me in a different light and see different opportunities I never anticipated. In fact, my phone and email resonate at least once a week with opportunities, some of which I never thought of. Fourth one is resources. And I don't know about you, but I'm a one-person company. I'm constrained with the amount of time, the amount of effort, and the amount of resources I have at my disposal. And I find by connecting with people and seeking to build relationships, what happens is I have more resources than I need. And the last payoff area I want to give you here is what I consider to be the most important, the most valuable and underutilized payoff area of networking. It's really simply the relationships you make as you connect with people, both formally and informally. Remember, I said you'll be different 3 years from now as a result of 2 things: the books you read and the people you meet. So as I wind down my little session, I was thinking, what could I bring you that would be helpful to you to take this information, to be able to revisit it, to be able to use it so that you could achieve more success. So here's what I've got. I mean, you go to my website, I've got tons of products I sell. I'm not here to sell anything. I've got a little 12-page ebook that's a compilation of the entire process and the strategies I've shared with you today. All you need to do is send an email to me at info@networkingforresults.com. Just put ebook in the subject line. I'll send you a copy of the ebook. I won't try and sell you anything else. This is just a value add option I want to give you. So if you're so inclined, send me that email. I'd be happy to send that to you. And as I wind down here, let me share with you my closing slide. Every person you meet has the potential to help you to the extent that he or she is willing and able. Your mission, I believe your obligation, is to stimulate their willingness as you discover their ability relative to your situation. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been a privilege and an honor to be here today. Thank you for your time. And now, go work your network. Back to you, Norval.
Thank you very much, Michael. That was excellent. If anybody has any questions for Michael, I know we're approaching the top of the hour here pretty quickly. Please do use the chat box. Some of you may have other obligations to be attending to, but we'll stick around here for a few minutes if you do have some questions for Michael. Michael, one of the questions is can you put the email address back up again?
I can.
Okay.
There you go.
There it is.
Thank you.
And let's see. you've got questions regarding the one chart that you showed that showed the amount of time that went out across, where you had the 5 seconds and it went out further across. You had time on the x-axis. Somebody's asking, well, what is the y-axis on that chart?
Listen, I'm not laughing because of the question. I'm just laughing. All that is a graphical representation of networking as a process from the beginning to the peak, and then back down, and then of course going up to the final outcome. There isn't an X or Y axis that I'm aware of. If I'm misunderstanding the question, please go ahead. So somebody said, so it could be a flat line. Yeah, it is a flat line. In the first series of arrows I showed you, it was just the 6 phases. I just want to remind everyone that the general progress of the process is a bit of a cold beginning as the two of you come together. Then as the two of you warm up together, you tend to emotionally, psychologically come together. And then all of a sudden, as it winds down, there's a general cooling of the relationship. But then your job is to continue building it till you get to a point where the outcomes arise. Again, I'm not sure I'm answering that correctly. The guy says, sorry, I'm an engineer. That's okay. That's okay.
Let's see. There were some questions that came through earlier as you were going along. One of them was, how do you narrow the field of a room to start networking?
Okay. And here's the starting point. And that's a great question, by the way. And my response is always the same. No matter how good you are at this, no matter how often you do it, if you're in the wrong network, it's not going to pay off for you. So the starting point of being more effective in networking is being in the right network. And I'm going to use ASQ as an example here, because if you're listening to this call, my presumption is you're in an area of focus, a discipline or a career that really is connected to the ASQ mindset, mentality, and methodology. So the starting point to being more effective is being in the right network. Now, once you're in the right network, there's a tendency for people to try and do one of two things. Walk into a room and try and get everybody's card. They say, I got to meet everybody. Or people will say, well, you know what? I'm just going to stand here and wait for people to come to me. My message is always the same. Networking is a process, and being in a network is a process. So rather than trying to meet everybody in one night or to find out everything about everybody in one shot, the smartest thing that you can do is embrace the process, to think in terms of the people that you're going to meet hold potential for you. What you want to do is get the conversation started, ignite the relationship, and do it in a context that will allow you and the other person to become comfortable. So my message to you is, rather than trying to zero in and eliminate people, focus on 3 to 5 quality conversations with people that you can relate to, that you can create a connection with, that you can discover some value with, and you can use as a basis or a launch pad to keep the relationship moving forward. You may meet more people, and if you do, that's good. But my experience has been, the more conversations you try to have within the context of an event, the lower the quality is. So if you can make it a manageable number of conversations, because remember, if you think in terms of an event, there are 4 components to an event. There's what I call there's what I call the meeting before the meeting, and that's the networking that occurs before an event starts. Most quality networking occurs before an event starts, right? Sure it does. The second is the meeting, and that's the formal part of the meeting. If you go to an ASQ meeting, there'll be some networking before, then you all sit down and you've got the leadership that talks about stuff, and you make it a presentation. So that's the formal part of the meeting. That you can identify who are the leaders in the group. You can get lots of quality information. There's the meeting inside the meeting. That's the meeting at your table, because if you sit at a table, you get a chance to have quality conversations with people around you. And then the fourth meeting is what I call the meeting after the meeting. That's the conversation you have on the way out, because you generally meet somebody after that. I know I got long-winded there, Norval, but I'm sorry.
No worries. Thanks for explaining that. I'm just going to go scroll down here and see if there's any other questions. It looks like we're a few. Oh, okay. From Andy. Are there any gender or age differences when you network? Easier to connect with women if you are female, easier to talk to the same age group?
Yeah, and that's an excellent question, and you're absolutely right. And that's something to take into consideration. Now, I don't want anyone to think I'm trying to profile anyone, because I'm not. But generally, you tend to network with people who are within your demographic. You can go 10 years lower or 10 years higher, but the closer they are to your demographic, generally, the more comfortable you feel with them. Gender works the same way. Women tend to network better with women than they do with men. Men tend to network better. It's because of the way our brains work. Now, that's not to say that men and women don't network well together. It's just important to understand that women, from a brain setup standpoint, they think and communicate differently than men. They are more attuned to emotions. They connect better. Men are generally more focused on the hunt, on the objective. So it's important to realize that when you're networking with a man, you may get down to the business component better. With women, they may want to talk about the emotional piece or what's important, or have that conversation more. So it's important to respect the other person, and in fact, make sure that you adapt your communication style so that it will benefit both of those people.
Okay. Thanks. Let's see. Are there any other questions? I'm not seeing the other questions in the chat box, Michael. I'm just looking at the clock. It's about 7 minutes past the hour. If nobody has anything else, just a quick reminder, the next webinar that we'll be offering will be on Monday, October 2nd. That will be Carl Pritchard with Titanic Risks, and that will be on at 12 o'clock noon Eastern time. So we look forward to those of you who have registered. Several of you have, so we look forward to seeing you on Monday. Looking to see if there's any other questions. I don't see any others. So I think with that, Michael, I think we're pretty much done.
All right. Well, thanks for the opportunity, Norval.
And thank you, Michael, for coming on with us today. We really appreciate it.
Have a great day, folks.
Thanks, and you too. And hope everybody does have the rest of the good rest of the day. And we'll hopefully see some of you on Monday. Thanks again. Bye now.